Yeah, my name is Mark, and today I'm going to be talking about cognitive control, task switching, and expert video game players. First, some acknowledgments. I'd like to thank all the gamers who participated in our study. They really went above and beyond Call of Duty and recruited their friends, and without them we would not have nearly enough participants to have made this possible. I'd also like to thank the guys who don't play video games who participated. There's actually not very many of these people in existence, so it was really helpful that we got their participation as well. Also, Dr. Minear in the back, instrumental to this. This study could not have happened without him. I'd like to start by talking about the mental demands placed on players of modern action video games. This is a screenshot from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. The first thing you might notice, if you're not a player, is that you have no idea what's going on here. That's perfectly fair. Look at how visually crowded the screen is. There's information everywhere. And you'll notice that information is present both in the center of the screen, where you see a small crouching figure a little to the left of that red dot. That is an enemy target that must be engaged quickly before it turns around and shoots the player, otherwise you lose. There's also information all over the periphery of this image. In the top left, there's a small map that shows kind of the layout of the zone you're playing in, along with important information such as red dots representing enemy locations and a helicopter of death flying nearby that could cause severe destruction to the player were he to move in a wrong area. Using all of this information present on screen to be successful isn't easy, and if you can't do it reasonably well, you lose, and losing sucks. In short, games are hard, and they require specialized skills to be played well. The question here is, do these skills translate to measures psychologists are interested in? From studies that have already been done, the answer could well be yes. Video game players outperform non-video game players on many different tests of visual attention. For example, they are more able to track multiple objects on screen at the same time, quickly and accurately. But we're interested in more than just visual selective attention, because if you think about it, games also involve fast and skilled evaluation and decision making. You need to do the right thing from a set of many different things you could do, and that requires knowledge and kind of executive control. In psychology, we call these kind of top-down processes. And researchers are only beginning to investigate these differences. This is one study. We used task switching to investigate cognitive control differences. The ability to switch between different mental sets is frequently identified as a core control process of the mind. And if you think about it, gaming consists of many subtasks that must be serially or simultaneously engaged in order to achieve successful outcomes in a game. Well, task switching introduces participants to two simple tasks, like identifying a letter as a consonant or vowel and a number as odd or even. And once you kind of introduce participants to these tasks and they get comfortable with them, you then have them switch back and forth between making judgments about the letter and judgments about the number. An example. Here we see two single task blocks, the one on the left being full of consonant-vowel trials, where you would be asked to say, oh, is this a consonant, oh, is this a vowel? And on the right, we see a single task block of odd-even trials. Here, this is a switching block consisting of a series of consonant-vowel trials, where you'd say, okay, that's a vowel, okay, that's a consonant. You press the vowel key or the consonant key when the screen came up. And then there's a switch to the odd-even trial, where you then have to make judgments about the letter. You switch back and forth between making judgments about the letter and judgments about the number, either in a predictable way or in a random way. There are several ways to manipulate this kind of program. So let's do some task switching now. Let's practice this. If I could please have everybody snap the fingers of your left hand. Okay, now your right hand. Good. Next, we're going to see an example of a consonant-vowel trial. Snap your left hand if the letter is a consonant, and your right hand if the letter is a vowel. You will always be shown what type of trial you are doing in the top corners of the screen. So, okay. Now you will decide whether the number shown is odd or even. For this odd-even trial, snap your left hand if the number is odd, and your right hand if the number is even. Remember that the cue shown will show you which type of trial it is. Okay, now we're going to do a couple more like these. So, okay. In our program, it's not just these simple screens. We actually use slight delays between the appearance of the cue, that is the words in the top corners of the screen, and the appearance of the stimulus. This allows us to control the amount of time a participant has to explicitly prepare for a trial. These next few trials mimic the program that we used. So, please snap your fingers. Perfect. You see how you got kind of in a rhythm, and your reaction times were quite fast there at the end of those consonant vowel trials. But as soon as I switched it to the odd even trial, there was a moment of stutter where you were unable to do it quite as efficiently. This moment of stutter is called the switch cost. Reaction times on switch trials, that is, that switch to odd even there at the end, are generally slower than on non-switch trials. And the switch cost is measured as the average reaction time of switch trials minus the average reaction time of non-switch trials. And this switch cost, measured in reaction time, is thought to reflect the time it takes to disengage from the mental processes required to do one task and engage the mental processes required to do the other task, even when these tasks are quite easy. Two different things. So some terms. The cue we use to kind of reduce the amount of things you have to remember, right? When you can see the cue, it's quite easy to make these, judgments because all the information you need is present on screen. The CSI stands for cue to stimulus interval, and is the length of time between the appearance of the cue and the onset of the stimulus. We varied the CSI to give different amounts of preparation. The trials you just did were of CSI 200, 200 milliseconds of length. We also had blocks of CSI 1200 where you had 1.2 seconds to make these judgments, so different preparation time, investigating different possible differences between groups. The stimulus, obviously the letter number pair that shows up in the middle of the screen. RCI is response to cue interval, and was not used in the trials you guys just did, but it is used in one of our blocks, and it consists of a blank screen that lasts for a predetermined amount of time in between the response that you give by pressing a key and the onset of the next cue, response to cue interval. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So for our study, we wanted to compare video game players versus non-video game players on either predictable switches or random switches, switches that switch every 4 trials, switches that switch in an unpredictable random fashion. The short CSI, short amount of preparation time versus long CSI, large amount of preparation time, and on switch trials versus non-switch trials. For methodological reasons, we also included a random switching block with a 200 CSI and a 1000 RSI, and hopefully if I have time we'll get to those results. Our participants were students. We had 12 expert video game players who reported playing 19 hours of video games a week. This is quite heavy usage, obviously, and 14 controls who reported playing less than 3. Now, some of the predictions possible from our design are that video gamers are better at rapid switching, in which case, in the short CSI blocks, we would see a difference in switch costs between the two groups. It's possible that gaming, the fast onset of different situations requires rapid switching ability, and that's one possibility. Another is that they're better at unexpected switching, that gamers show smaller switch costs, that gamers would show smaller switch costs in random blocks as opposed to predictable blocks, because game environments are unpredictable and whatnot. And the third possibility is that gamers are better at forward planning, that whatever the situation in the game, people who play video games need to develop a strategy for success, and that informs all of their behavior within the game, and if that affects something in general, then maybe you would see that manifest in differences in task switching. And these are our results. The third prediction most closely matches what we saw. We see in the 2 left homes, the P1200 and the P200, the greatest differences. So it appears that there is some sort of preparation skill that gamers are using that video game players are not. these differences were not in fast switches because they appear only in the P200, the predictable 200, but not in the random 200, where there's no difference between the groups. And there's no differences in random switching because these bars are so close. Our third kind of interesting result is that here in the R200 RCI 1000 condition, which is a random condition where there is a difference. And the key factor here is the 1 second of blank screen time after a response. So there's a situation going on where there's nothing on screen, yet gamers are still able to use this time in a way that non-gamers are not. And I'll get to why we think that might be here in a second. Collapsing our results across group, we see a main effect difference of reaction time. Gamers overall respond quicker. However, these differences are slight, except in switch trials under predictable conditions. Our major differences are on those predictable trials, and the differences there are caused by gamers being significantly faster on primarily these switch trials. In predictable conditions, they're not so much faster on the non-switch trials. It's like they're just really fast on the switch trials, and then they kind of go back into a normal pattern of responses. We think these differences are due to gamers employing some kind of preparatory strategy that non-gamers do not employ, and that is where these differences are. The random 1000 condition kind of informs our judgment and gives us reason to think that proactive cognitive control is involved. There's some sort of active strategy going on that is employed both in predictable conditions where they know exactly what type of trial is coming up, and where there's just a little bit of dead space, so they can't explicitly prepare for what's coming next. However, they still appear to be readying themselves in general for either possibility. Note especially that these advantages are in the predictable condition and not in random switching or fast switching, both of which might have suggested kind of faster, knee-jerk, reactive control. That is not what we found. These differences appear to be due to kind of a forward-looking, forward-planning strategy. We have a follow-up study underway. Thank you.